So what we're going to be doing today is really focusing on some of the key elements, as Waldret was saying, about what are the building blocks that you need in terms of pulling a competitive postdoctoral grant application together. So we'll be talking about, obviously, patient-public involvement with Una and Paula. Steve will be talking about the really important thing about framing your research question so that it becomes the most important research question of all of the applications. Then we've got Simon Kane, who's talking about presentation skills, which is very important. Once you get there, you've usually got a 50-50 chance of once you get to a panel, and it's really important that you sell yourself well at the panel. And then putting those things into application with Sue and Matthew. But first, it gives me the greatest pleasure to introduce Associate Professor Laura Coates. So Laura, I worked with at Leeds when she was a rheumatology trainee. And she completed rheumatology training at Leeds, but she's now an associate professor at Oxford. And one of the reasons why I was really keen on getting Laura to come and speak is that she's had a fairly unusual postdoc journey, and wanted to give her the opportunity to kind of talk about some of the things that drove her decisions in her career. She's so talented in so many areas that she makes me sick. She's the most fabulous chef. She's a mother of 2 gorgeous children, and she's just finished her gymnastics training. So she obviously has a lot of spare time. So it absolutely gives me a great deal of pleasure to thank Laura for accepting the invitation to be our inspirational speaker.
Thank you. So clearly, because I make her feel sick, she decided that the best punishment for this is to make me be inspirational on a Tuesday morning. So this is my best effort at being inspirational. So I'm a rheumatologist. I started off in medical training back in the old days when you were a pre-registration house officer, then an SHO and then a registrar. And it was really straightforward. I came into rheumatology because I liked doing rheumatology. It seemed quite cool. There was some interesting stuff that I didn't really understand. And lots of other specialties seemed a bit the same. Diabetes was just all insulin. Heart attacks, they just all went to CCU, and they all got the same drugs every time. And rheumatology had weird stuff that I didn't know what it was. Weird vasculitises and things that you didn't really understand and couldn't remember from finals. So I picked rheumatology, and it all seemed fine, because I was going to do my nice 4 years as a registrar and finish up as a consultant, work 3 days a week, have a couple of kids and a life, and I'd probably be a better gymnastics coach. But it didn't go like that. So I did my house officer and my SHO period, and then modernising medical careers came in. Anybody remember modernising medical careers? They wrote to you and said, if you're thinking of staying in a medical career in the UK, don't leave the country. And that was when we were about to go travelling to New Zealand, so that didn't work. And they said, you've got to apply now, because otherwise the jobs will never exist again. So I applied for a number, didn't get it, but somehow got given, via varying dodgy Leeds routes, a funded research post for a year, and that turned into a PhD. I did a little bit of time back as a reg, then was really lucky that they had invented what were Walport lectureships, what became the NIHR CL posts, and applied for one of them. Ran off internationally briefly for a year, and finally became a consultant after a much longer period than planned down in Oxford. And the eagle-eyed people will notice that there's a couple of gaps in there. So this is gap number 1. He's now 10 and has just broken 4 of his front teeth last week. So he's about to cost me more than any NIHR fellowship would ever pay. And this is gap number 2. She's 7. And she's the reason I'm a gymnastics coach, because there's a 2-year waiting list to get into gymnastics unless your parent becomes a coach. Hence, I'm now a qualified gymnastics coach. But I'm going to take you back to this point, which was my kind of leap, I think, when I was deciding what to do. So as Anne-Marie said, I had the pleasure of training with Anne-Marie up in Leeds. I was in Yorkshire for 11 or 12 years, was very nicely settled. And then for some crazy reason, I decided to leave all of that behind and head south, a long way south, where mortgages treble, down to the beautiful Oxford. And I went from 11 or 12 years of all of my research training, many drunken nights with this lady down the front, and an amazing group of people, people that I had grown up with, the people you do your PhD with, you bond with impressively, because you're there for each other through thick and thin. Nearly all of us tended to have kids at the same time, which is very handy as well. So there were large maternity leave parties, and I knew everybody I needed, and they knew me. So I felt that they trusted me, that they knew what I could do, that I had some credibility. And then all of a sudden, I ended up here. It was just me. This is my little desk on my first day. One of the secretaries had retired. So they gave me her old computer because I didn't have a computer. What I did have was what's now an advanced fellowship, what was then the Clinician Scientist Award. So I did have 5 years funding. I did have a plan, because I had to write that to get the Clinician Scientist. That was handy. So I had a plan and I had a research project, but it felt very much alone. And it was a really big change to go from having everybody you knew you needed on call, the lovely Anne-Marie to solve all problems down the corridor, and just knowing who to talk to in the sponsor's office, who to talk to in the finance department, who would help you when you were stuck, who would cover for you when you were off on holiday and you needed somebody to watch your emails. And I turned up in Oxford and they all thought I knew something. I had this fellowship. I was now a consultant, which is like grown up and important. And so I was meant to be like a boss. And I very much felt like a boss, not really a boss, but just a little bit like one. And it felt really scary. It felt like nobody in Oxford really knew me. Why would anybody trust me that I would know what I was doing or want to help me out? And I didn't know who were my people to ring. And that's what you need. You need your community. And that might be your NIHR community. It's going to be your department community. It's going to be your disease area community. There's loads of different communities out there, but you need your people. As Walgett said, this is a team sport. It's not an individual pursuit. So it took me a while, but I've got my team now. So I've got my hospital team, so Oxford University Hospitals, where I am still unpaid, but hoping to be paid as my fellowship runs out in March, to do 2 days a week and to do clinics. And I'm setting up services, and I've managed to establish myself as a consultant and helping to lead the clinical service. I've got my trials unit, so I'm a trialist. I do patients, I don't do cells. Or mice. I haven't set foot in a lab since school. So unless you can have a reasonable conversation with the people, I'm not doing the research. So I need my trials unit to underpin and keep me on the straight and narrow. I've got the research design service. I think I completely underutilised these at earlier points in my career. Our South Central Research Design Service are ace. They're free. They help you. They offer you loads of advice. They will do mock interviews. They will look at your applications. They are absolutely stunning. So contact RDS because they're brill. And I've got my PPI group. I've always had a good PPI network through national groups, but I'm building that in Oxford as well as part of our BRC collaboration. It was pointed out at our midway BRC review that PPI was not as good as it could be across our theme of the BRC. We have some great groups, some not so great groups. And I said, when I was in Leeds, we used to have really great PPI meetings. And they went, lovely, yours. And so I'm now the PPI coordinator for the BRC, because that's what happens when you lift your head above a parapet. So this has got me to where I am today. This is half a chair. I'm an associate professor, so this is how I've explained it to non-academics. I haven't got a chair, I've got a half a one. It's a bit wobbly, but nonetheless, it does hold you off the floor, at least temporarily. So this is where I've got to. So I'm now meant to be inspirational and share advice, the lessons that I've learned, what you can do, what you should do, what you don't want to do. So this is my initial caveat. And again, I suspect most people are not necessarily the right vintage to appreciate the sunscreen song of 99. You couldn't escape it, and trust me, in 1999. It's a classic. I would definitely relive it. But it's based actually on this lady's speech. So she's a journalist and she did a speech and he nicked it and made a record and clearly made lots more money out of it. So advice is always a little bit unhelpful because it never exactly pertains to what you need to know. So that's my caveat. But I'm going to go broad and hopefully some of this might be useful. So this is what we're aiming for. This is the whole chair, has 4 legs, much more stable. And this is still where I'm heading up these steps, and they look like they're a long way away. But the first bit is to just concentrate on that first set of steps. And this is where you lot already are. You're on the steps. You're not at the bottom. You're already part way up the steps. You've got somewhere already, and that takes effort and determination and good ideas and mostly hard work. So in terms of kind of top tips for those early stages, we were talking about funding. Waljet's shown some lovely slides with 20 million different funding opportunities on. When you're just postdoc, you want to be thinking about the big stuff. You want to be thinking about your advanced fellowships, your clinical scientists. But there's also the littler things that keep you going, and they're really important as well. So having a clinical lecturer post made a massive difference to me. Just having half of my time, slightly less, for research really gave me the time to keep things going, finish projects off, write stuff up, think of ideas. The Academy of Medical Sciences starter grant specifically for CL positions. It's not a huge amount of money, but you can use it to finish off stuff that you probably should have finished before. You can use it to do something new and funky with some stuff you've already collected in your PhD, or you can come up with a new project, and that's kind of your pilot grant money to then think about where you want to go next. There's lots of societies that will be helpful. So whatever specialty you're in, get to know your disease society, research group, or even patient group. So a lot of the patient charities, I have a great relationship with PAPA, who are the patient charity that one of the patient charities I work most closely with. They're a really small outfit. They don't have much money. But if they give me a grant of £200 just to pay for some postage stamps, I can then get it on the CRN portfolio because it's got outside funding. So 200 quid goes a long way when it gets you CRN funding. And think about research for patient benefit. I know you're hearing more about this over the next 3 days. Thinking about other grant schemes that you can apply for that will be very much open to newer PIs, to people still in training, postdoc, with the right support and mentorship to get you started onto the bigger grants. Networking, everybody talks about networking, and some people are horrified by the whole idea, presumably the introverts who've been much happier at home for the last 18 months. Just make friends. It really shouldn't have to be a big deal, hopefully, if you find the right people. Ask your supervisors, go to meetings, volunteer to do stuff. We're always looking for keen people to do stuff. And that's how you get involved. That's how an awful lot of my papers started, linking up with people internationally, linking up with people more senior than you, and also linking up with people your stage, other places, because you, in the end, will be the top people who can then network and get your teams together. So these are some of the groups that I kind of had networked through in the rheumatology space and am now helping to lead some. Be a Tigger, not an Eeyore. This is my only useful tip for fellowship interviews. You'll hear more later today that's far more useful. But be enthusiastic. All of us do it because we believe in what we do and we love it. We're not here for the money. We're not here for the kudos. We're here for the hard work. So you've got to be enthusiastic. And that, I think, is what you've got to get across at a fellowship interview, that you really want to do this. Because then, even if your project's a little bit shaky, and my first PhD application really was, they went, you know what, the application's a bit shaky, but she looks good. Apply again. Apply next year. Sort out your project. get some different supervisors, organise something that will actually make sense, and come back. And I got it the second time round. Ask for help. Ask for help from anyone. So even big, scary people are really approachable in the end. I have cold emailed a bunch of people in Oxford that I've never met, who were all important, full chair, four-legged professors, not the two-leg sort. And I just randomly emailed somebody and went, you know what, you look like you do what I need, and we could do something cool together. And it's taken 4.5 years, but we submitted our NIHR HS&DR grant this summer, and I'm not a HS&DR kind of person. I'm a HTA, Middle E kind of person, but she's the HS&DR expert, and together we can do something cool. So ask for help for people who don't do what you do, who will add to your project. And if you're writing something and you're not sure, show it to people who know nothing about it, because you'll also get great ideas from them. So my Clinician Scientist grant, which is now coming to an end, was all around the ideas of trials within cohorts, kind of platform trials and embedding trials into cohorts. And that completely came about because I had a conversation with somebody who knows really not a lot about my disease area at all. But she went, oh, I've heard about this new research design on this course. It sounds like you could maybe link that in. And we did. So talk to people who are outside your sphere as much as you can and just get ideas and run things past people. Expand your horizons. This looks exciting. So where you can travel, these travelling £5,000 to go play with somebody else for a bit sounds really cool. I'm taking that home because I didn't know they exist. This is why we come to stuff. It's not to help you guys, it's to learn stuff too. So when you can, go other places. Meet people, travel when COVID ever goes away, and when you're fully vaccinated. So because I was slightly unorthodox in my clinical lecture, so I broke the mould and upset a lot of people in Leeds by saying I wanted to do a clinical lecturer part-time. And I still work 80%, I have done since my kids were small. So for all of the time that I was in Leeds in my CL, I did 50% NHS, because then they could match me with a pair, and we would cover the wards and cover the clinics. And then I did 30% research. So I basically just lost a day of research, did it in the evenings and didn't get paid. Take of that what you will, but on my day off I can tell people that I'm not coming to a meeting, except today. But then it meant that I had all this research time saved up. All of those little 0.2s, all of that time, I was meant to be balanced. I was meant to be 50-50. And I suddenly realised that I could nick off with that money wherever I wanted. And again, Leeds didn't want me to point that out to too many people. But once I worked it out, I'd met this lovely chap. So this is a guy called Chris Richlin. He's a professor at the University of Rochester in New York. And he does a lot of work in GRAPPA, which is our international research group. I'd gone along to GRAPPA because my supervisor dragged me along. I'd looked keen and they'd given me a load of review papers to do. I still looked keen, so they gave me the treatment recommendations to write, which involved a massive systematic literature review. But this chap was amazing, and he kept saying to me, if you want a job, let me know. And I was like, do you think he really means it? I'm not sure. And so at one conference, I went, you know, you said that, did you really mean it? And he went, yeah. When do you want to come? And I was like, oh, God, not yet. Hang on. I'm trying to have another baby. So we had the other baby, came back from maternity leave, and we naffed off to Rochester. So I learnt ultrasound. I worked with one of the top ultrasound specialists in the US. I did clinics. I didn't officially treat anybody because I don't have the right exams, but I, reviewed people, which was perfect. It meant you can do clinics and no admin. I did combined clinics, and I just saw how somebody else worked. And it's amazing how going to a different department and stealing ideas makes a difference to your future. And we had a year there in total, and it was definitely not all work. My other top tip, if you can afford it, is get a wife. Wives are amazing. So this is my lovely wife, James, in the red T-shirt, and he was my wife-free. It was amazing. He picked up the kids, he did a little bit of Open University stuff, and he cooked the dinner, and he came and picked me up, and it made my life brilliant. So I recommend wives, but have not sadly had one since 2015. And then think about who's on your journey with you. So the first two that you see on the left here are my PhD supervisors, and they're still probably the people that I would ring for advice now, and probably always will be. So Philip is unofficially granddad, and Uncle Philip to my children, and they have been amazing support and have done all the right things for me, from being a PhD student where they dragged me along and volunteered me for shit that they didn't want to do, to now offering me advice and even occasionally jobs, and support all the way through. So if you get the right people, they will transition into doing a different role for you, but just as an important role. Chris is still a really close friend, having spent a year with him. He's an amazing external person to bounce ideas off. Andy Carr has been my boss when I came to Oxford. I'd never met Andy until I turned up to Oxford. I'd never spent that much time with academic orthopaedic surgeons. That was a revelation. I did orthopaedics in the old-fashioned, not so academic variety. And now in a kind of full circle thing, I've ended up back with Phil Quirk as my mentor. So Phil leads the academic trainees in Leeds. I've been gone 5 years, but we recently got matched on the NIHR mentoring programme, and we did that awkward, hey, do you remember me? Were you a trainee in Leeds? Thing. But he's now my independent mentor, because he's kind of sent me out into the world and is offering me a critical but useful advice as a mentor, which is what you need. As you get further up those steps, I'm still only here, but this is what I've learnt briefly from the more recent times. So it's a really long road, and it gets longer because the projects get bigger. So when you're doing your little stuff, post-PhD, your starter grants and stuff, it's like a year. And then you realise that these grants are 5 years, and the one that we've submitted this summer, which is for a 4-year project, took 4 years to prepare, with pilot work and initial work. So you've got to think about that long term, and that's been a really big shift for me post-PhD, to stop thinking about the little project and start thinking long-term strategy. And this is my top tip from Andy Carr. He was horrified. So I use a thing called Trello. We will get to Trello shortly. But it colour codes all my projects. And I basically ran out of colours. I had everything colour coded, and I was like, the problem is it only has 11 or 12 colours, and I've run out. And he went, Laura, you've got to stop. You've got to get rid of some of those colours. Think big, do the big important stuff, start getting rid of some of the rest. You've got to be concentrating on the big stuff that will build you a senior career, rather than all the little projects with little bits of money left, right and centre. So that's what I'm trying to do. My Trello still does not look like primary colours. This is my Trello. If you take one thing away, use Trello. It's amazing. So this is my to-do list. You can see just there is my, oh my God, I've got to write an inspirational talk, and it has to be done by September 21st so I can take it with me. So this was while I was still writing the talk. It's now over in the done list. You can colour code things, you can put dates on it, it goes red when you're overdue. Oops. And most importantly, you can have a list for things that other people are doing. Because I realised I was going, this contract needs sorting out, and handing it over, and then somebody didn't do anything for 6 months. And I'd kind of forgotten it, because it wasn't in my inbox, it wasn't my job to be doing, but it's me that suffers when it doesn't get done. So that's all the stuff that other people are meant to be doing, so I can keep an eye on them, and I know what they're up to. So Trello is amazing. It has revolutionised my life, courtesy of my once wife, now husband, James, who got me onto Trello. So that's my mostly useful tip, Trello.com. And other than that, work hard, talk to lots of people, and that's about it.
Thank you, which is why we asked Laura to come. And Laura didn't even speak about, we were quite happy to help Laura move to Oxford. because it was the right place for her to go. And so, we knew that was the best place for her. And I think those decisions that she made were absolutely amazing. So thank you. Karen, do we have any questions from the virtual delegates for Laura?
There's a lot of excitement about the song that you mentioned. Yeah, some excitement for Trello as well. Yeah,
there we go.
People saying really great presentation, so interesting and inspiring, and they really did find it inspirational. But no questions as such from them as yet. But I don't know if there might be some in the room.
Here we go.
So, my name is Atasham. I'm a clinical research fellow in diabetes at University of Leicester. I'm halfway through my PhD or research fellowship, and I still get that thought, this is never going to complete. This is never going to finish, especially pandemic, and then I get sidetracked on other things as well. Is that part of the journey? Did you have that feeling that you're not going to finish it? And
I still have that feeling. So my NIHR Clinician Scientist officially expires the end of February next year, which is about 6 months. And I'm at least 2 years behind with COVID. We've had centres that closed 18 months ago, still have not reopened. We've got additional money. Actually, in some ways, COVID has helped, because part of the reason we were behind was COVID. Some of it is not all COVID, but everybody's got slightly more flexible with COVID. We've got additional money. We're propping things up. We're keeping things going. You have to keep believing, would be the only thing I can say. All of us are there. I don't think, as far as I'm aware, that ever goes away. Waldrit? Yeah, doesn't go away.
I think you made an interesting point. And I've mentored a fellow recently who is brilliant, and the first mentoring meeting I just told her to write down what she was doing, and she was doing 13 projects. That is you're never going to finish, and she is, over the last year, I'm not taking all of the credit for this, but she's got her papers out. You've got to know what's the metrics that you're going to be judged on. It's getting outputs so that the panel will be completely fair. So she's got her papers out, she got interviewed for a grant, didn't get it, and now she's got a Wellcome Trust clinical 5-year development award. So I think you do have to focus, and I think you said very wisely, concentrate on the big stuff. So of your 10 things that you're really passionate about, what is the biggest one? And that usually is the one that's going to be the most clinically impactful. Because you do want to have fun and do other things as well.
Brilliant. Thanks. We've got questions from our virtual audience.
Yes. So first of all, how did you know it was the right time to move from Leeds?
Oh, so that was really hard. I toyed with the idea of applying for a fellowship. So I was really scared about applying for a fellowship and moving at the same time. It turns out quite rightly, because that's quite a big leap. Because then you haven't met anybody that you're about to be applying with. And I wasn't sure I was going to get the support I really needed from Leeds for them to apply for £1 million grant for a different university. And I obviously never doubted key people, but some didn't take it quite so well. So I toyed with the idea of applying and then trying to move. And it's hideous trying to move. Like when you're doing research, you've got projects all over the shop, really, and there's stuff that you're trying to finish off, and you can't leave those patients or that trial or that work. So it's really tricky to find the right timing. And I very much had planned to apply in Leeds and then think about moving. And then I realised that actually that wasn't really going to work. So for obvious reasons, the fact they don't love fellowships moving, because you applied with the people and the infrastructure to support you, and then there's a concern about why you're moving partway through. And I can't get a year through planning my project in one city and move to a completely different one when it's a clinical trial. It's not going to work. I can't start recruiting patients and abandon them. So actually for me it fell at the right time, and I was post-maternity, a year in Rochester, and then did a year of basically tidying up. I did have that horrible moment where you have to tell the big boss that you're going to leave. So I was at the American College of Rheumatology whilst I was in America, and I asked to meet up. And I was on the phone to my husband in the run-up going, it's going to shout at me. It's going to shout at me, I'm going to cry. And he went, if he shouts at you, go, this is why I'm leaving. And I was like, oh yeah. And actually he didn't shout at me then. He went on the charm offensive, which didn't work. Then we just had some really interesting mock interviews, which were an experience. With very unsubtle questions. But yeah, you have to take a leap at some point, and I think it was, if I'd waited much longer, it would have been even harder.
So I'm going to take another one. So someone's coming towards the end of their PhD. What tips or advice would you give them in terms of timing and applying for grants?
Already. So plan ahead, because these things always take time. Think about what little stuff you can do, and think about what you've got at the end of your PhD. So I did a large clinical trial as part of my PhD, which was possibly me being over enthusiastic. But it meant that we had an amazing data set at the end. So you've got stuff from your PhD that you can do more with. And if you can get little grants from charities, from societies, starter grants, that kind of thing to keep you going, then that's brilliant. If you can get a CL post, if you're either medical or allied health, so that you can continue a bit of training and kind of underpin your salary costs for a bit, that makes a massive difference. But yeah, unfortunately, you have to plan a long way in advance.
Okay, have you been able to publish easily?
I don't think anybody publishes easily. It never feels easy. I have a fair number of publications, which helps, and working with the research groups that I have has made a massive difference to that. So an awful lot of my publications are not, well, none of them are just mine, but an awful lot of them are not predominantly mine either. They're very much team projects, literature reviews, helping out other people, that really build your CV and start building on stuff like that. Then you have to work out what the big things are, what your big projects are, where you get the big publications. One of my very good friends from SHO days is now a deputy editor at The Lancet. And she was visiting for a weekend, and I was like, we're going to submit our clinical trial to The Lancet. And she tried to let me down gently. Bless her. She was like, you realise we only take like 3 rheumatology papers a year, because this is like all of medicine. It's not a rheumatology journal. But she did say you've got to write your covering letter really well. Sell it in the covering letter. And that's the first covering letter I've spent that long on. It was like writing another blooming paper. But I put so much effort into that cover letter, and we got our Lancet publication. We were one of the 3 that year. So you've got to think of where the big stuff is, where you aim high. The other stuff will find its place. Plenty of stuff gets rejected. You recycle it. I've recycled one yesterday that's been rejected for the 2nd time, and is now going off to its 3rd journal, which we're hopeful for. So just keep going.
So we've got 3 on the same topic, if this could be the last one.
Okay, last one.
Managing to juggle a career and young children. Did you ever get pushback for working part-time? Sometimes the juggle feels impossible.
Yeah, it does. It really does. So I was debating which bit of my story to start with, and we talked about I talked with my husband about what was the biggest crunch point, and we decided that I was trying to be inspiring, not depressing, so we decided to skip that one. But we'll do it in the Q&A. So I applied for my clinical lecturership as a registrar, post-PhD, with some papers, with a plan. And I said right from the beginning, I want to do this part-time. So I'll do 50% NHS. I talked to the TPD extensively beforehand, so the person that organises all the training posts, and went, look, I'll do 50% NHS, I'll do 30% research, and then we'll figure it out. I'll do an extra research block somewhere, but I'll make the job work to fill in the gap. The most pushback we had from clinical consultants was from a female academic who wasn't at all convinced that we could job share a clinical role, particularly on the wards, which we did very well. Or at least nobody died. So that's pretty good. And then the other pushback I had was in the run-up. So I thought I'd sorted this. I discussed it with the TPD. We had a plan. We had a job share plan in mind. And the interview was the Wednesday. And on Monday, I got a phone call from the TPD who says, the person who's chairing this panel has told me that you can't do it part-time. It's not an option. They're happy to appoint you full-time or to consider you full-time, but you can't go part-time. And I spent Monday evening in tears for a good 3-4 hours, having a complete crisis on the sofa. And I went back in the next day and various people said, just go full-time, you'll be fine, you can manage it, you're working hard anyway. And I decided that this was the hill I was going to die on, and I was going to give it up then. I was going to stay part-time in my clinical job, and I was going to wave goodbye to my academic career and do what I could on the side. And so I rang the TPD back and said, you need to confirm that today because I will pull out of the interview tomorrow. Because I've always been told that you don't go for an interview if you're not willing to take the job, and I am now not willing to take the job. And at that point, some alarm bells in HR started to ring. And we got another phone call back again to say, apparently, the comments had been misconstrued. When that person had said, you can't do the job part-time, it's full-time or nothing, I'd misinterpreted that. And actually, I could do it part-time, and they'd love for me to come for the interview. And I went to the interview. And by some miracle, there were 2 of us, the other of which who wanted to work full-time, but they found 2 jobs. So we thought we were going for 1 job. They found a second job staggered around the financial year and all that jiggery-pokery with clinical lecturer posts. And so I got the job. It's caused a load of hassle ever since, but it's always been worth it. I couldn't get a nursery place when I moved to Oxford because nursery places through the university are either full-time or 3 days. They don't do full. So I said, well, I'll just pay for 5 then. I'll just pay full-time and you can give that day to somebody else who needs it. No, you can't do that because you're only employed 4 days a week, so you can't have 5. So it's always caused a battle, but it means that on my Tuesdays before my kids were both at school, I generally didn't work unless it's something I really wanted to do, and then Peppa Pig comes in handy. On the days that there's something I really want to do, I try and persuade my husband to become my wife again, and that's today. So today is a mummy day, and my husband has to pick them up from school later and deal with them for the evening. So it requires a bit of flexibility, but I love the fact that I can say no to things that I don't want to do on my Tuesday day off. I'm possibly getting paid a lot less doing exactly the same amount of work and fitting it into other times, but I'm good with that.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
There's more questions if you want to come and answer them, typing.
Cool. That would be great. So I really wanted you to answer that question. And I think one of the
Can you just say something about fellowships and part-time?
Yeah.
So I think on that point, MRC welcome NIHR, any fellowship panel will want to know if you've got COVID problems, childcare problems, if you've got anything. It's going to put it in your form. We have now got a box for the NIHR application form, and it will be considered as part of that. And if you don't put it down, the panel can't judge you. So somebody recently has got an NIHR advanced fellowship in the last round, and one of the things I said to her, and she's got 3 kids, and she's done a master's, and she's an amazing person, and she's got nothing about her kids in there and the maternity breaks. So there's other ecosystems that we work in that are a little bit more difficult, but if you're the best person, you can go any percentage you like, essentially down to 50%, and it does not count against you at all. In fact, it will count in your favour. So if you've had 3 kids and done what Laura's done, which is why she got her NIHR fellowship. So, but if you don't put it down, so people kind of think, oh, I've had these issues, whatever, and you see these smooth careers and whatever, it will count in your favour, because if you've got slightly less publications because you were off with COVID for 2 years, or you've got caring responsibilities for an elderly relative or whatever, there is now a box that we specifically ask you to put it in. And that is so that we can judge your application fairly against somebody who hasn't had those circumstances. So it's just an important point I wanted to make.
Thanks, Roger. Oh, and Dave. This session's going way over time. Sorry to the virtual audience, but it's important stuff.
Just to echo that, this issue of fairness and equal opportunities for everybody is something that everyone in the sector takes incredibly seriously. And the funders are increasingly pressurising employers to make sure that they do it properly. And that story about the misunderstanding around, that's actually illegal, what they described. Over the years, I've got involved in many things where people have just discovered a strange misunderstanding and it's all okay afterwards. And I think it's wrong and we need to push back at it as you did. Just to say, there is a piece of work going on at the moment with all the main funders about real change in terms of how we look after people, so that staying on the academic pathway is based on your ability and based on your desire to do it. It's not based on your personal circumstances or background or family. And there's going to be real implementation of change between ourselves, MRC and Wellcome. One of the things I'm very proud of my time at NIHR is that NIHR have really led the way with this. We take this incredibly seriously, and if people are messing around, we're very happy to get involved and stop that. We discovered about 3 years ago that we have all the money and universities want it, and that simple observation has acted like a sort of real moment of enlightenment, and if you threaten them with not having the money, then these misunderstandings all disappear. So we do take it incredibly seriously on your behalf, and stuff like that happens, and it shouldn't happen, and hopefully in the future it won't happen, but if it does happen, you push back at it and get the support of us if need be.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think we're very mindful when we talk about a positive research culture, often that's what we're talking about, people in power who are behaving badly and need to be called on it. So when, like Laura, like, that doesn't sound right, I think you really do need to have, be able to call people, and if you need help doing that, then.
But it is definitely changing. I came to Oxford to meet with my current boss, Andy Carr, the first time ever, and he said, so who else is coming with you? Can we do anything else to support you? Can we put you in contact with people who know about schools, stuff like that, so you know where to live? And I came out shocked. Somebody had ever asked in a positive way about my family. So it is definitely changing, and I think there's so many more opportunities, so much more understanding about flexible working for any reason, that makes a massive difference. And it's now not something you have to hide, it's something that you are honest about and people will not judge you negatively for.
Brilliant. So can we thank Laura for feeling the fear and coming along and being inspirational?